Good morning, 11th Adar. Greatest Torah because it brings healing to all who need a healing. Who are they?
It is Shmuel ben Devorah, Shmuel ben Marav, Hillel ben Hilah.
You're breaking up badly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yehuda Skolda Bas Eliza Hana, Chaim Yaakov Zeb ben Sarel, Yosef Yotzak ben Lior, Shoshana Bas Hana, Gary Roberts, son of George, um, Yaakov Shaul ben Hana, Miriam Yehudi Gila Bas Raphael. And this is the yort site of my sister, Gabriela Bas Menachem Mendel HaKohen.
Okay, refuah shlema to those, and her neshama should have an aliyah.
Amen. Thank you.
Tuvia ben Avram, refuah shlema. Yair ben Adela. Mordechai Yehuda ben Chana Yisrael ben Yomin ben Leah Gittel. Devorah Leah bas Rusa Hubaliba, Rivka Mina bas Chaya Esther. Anybody else?
Yes, Shalom Dovber ben Rachel.
Amen. Refuah shlema.
And Avraham David ben Esther Rivka.
Refuah shlema b'korev.
Amen. Menachem Yehuda Nisan ben Razel Tzivia.
Refuah shlema b'korev mamash. Yom Yom. 11. The following is well known. Well, I guess we'll learn it and it will be well known to us as well, and is a tradition regarding the kavonos, which he says in parentheses is the mystical intentions. That's added, that's not in the Hebrew. The mystical intentions in davening. What's well known about the kavonos in davening? Well, for those intellectually incapable of meditating, doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you just don't have what in mind. You don't have the stuff in there to hold on to, or you're not used to it. But if in any case, if you're a little bit impaired in terms of having what to meditate upon or how to meditate, so for those intellectually incapable of meditating on those kavanas, either because they lack knowledge or because they can't remember the specific kavana during prayer, it is sufficient that they keep one general kavana in mind. And this, of course, is speaking to us, that his prayer be heard by Hashem. Keep that kavana in mind when one is davening, that one's prayer should be heard by Hashem with all the kavanas described in the Kabbalah literature. That's a nice thing. I mean, just to think occasionally, Hashem, hear me, listen to me, and count it and accept it with all the kavanas in them, even though I don't know what they are, but they're all embedded in this simple kavana. With that, we'll move on to lessons in Tanya, chapter Lamed Gimel. And yesterday we and Hasidus darshan Lamed Beis as the heart, the chapter of love. So we could darshan this chapter as Gal Enai, Lamed Beis, open up our mind and heart. Chapter 33, page 430 in Lessons in Tanya. And here in the Likutei Moharan, yes, page 82. The oidzo is tia simchas hanefesh ha'amiti. So he's back to giving us more advices. Definitely giving us advice today. To open up the heart, to get rid of the heart of stone, to not bring one's worries into davening and into learning, but to bring those worries or moments that one needs to take an accounting of yourself into special times which are reserved for that. But another thing, if you find yourself that you're not, and it's just coming upon you, that you're not open, you're not feeling the godliness, you have timtum alev, etc., the hardness of heart. So there's something else you can do and think about. And this is, as I say, this is an instruction for what to do, a hisbaininess that a person can do to bring the joy of one's soul, the true joy of one's soul, out into the open. Specifically, when you look into your soul, when in the fixed and prepared times for that, and you look at yourself and you see that your heart is not open, and you need to and want to have the illumination of the joy of the heart. So, then deepens your thought, bring your brain, and imagine in your mind, and in your bina. Now there are levels here, right? I mean, Mashaba, thought is just because there are levels here. Thought is letters, but they're letters before they come into speech. One thinks in some kinds of articulation, whether it's musical notation or ABCD, whatever it is, that occurs in thought. And then imagine, Yitzhak, form is the word, in your intellect, and then in your bina. And we've learned before, and it's brought many times into Chassidus, that a quote from the Zohar, Bina Liba. Bina is the heart, ubo halev mevin, and it brings the heart to understand. So we have thought, we have one's contemplation, imaginative contemplation, and we have Bina to bring to the heart. So a person should deepen oneself in these things. Just a second, and then we'll come back to you, Roja. Deepen one's thought and imagine in one's intellect and in one's Bina what? The inyan of Yehudi Yisborach, the inyan of the topic of the unity of Hashem Yisborach, Halmiti, the true inyan of Hashem, which we will now elaborate on. But Rosa, you have a hand up. What?
So I know that there's so many topics here, but I just have this question because I've gone over these words many times.
Yeah.
Is there any practical way to
do this?
It's telling you to think deeply about Hashem, and it's telling you to imagine. Yitzhar b'sifla would mean picture it.
Yes, picture.
What do you have any metaphors or something that can help us picture this?
Yes. I do this most of the time when I want to work. Let him say it. Well, no, I'll say it, then let him say it. Okay. Along Eastern Parkway where I walk, there are trees. And I was particularly sensitive to this on the Tu B'Shvat, when we're talking about trees, and Adam Eitz HaSoda, man is a tree of the field. And just look at a tree. A tree is rooted in the ground, and it's growing up. And it's not hard to imagine a tree as a body which is rooted in the ground and grows and spreads its limbs upward. All right, so from that perspective, you begin to get a feel that really everything and anything you look at is an expression of Hashem. I can look at the concrete and bring to mind certain things that I know, that man is called Adama. It's the aleph in the inanimate. And here's a piece of inanimate, which is the concrete. And I'm thinking, Adam, that the aleph, the aluf shel olam, is in it. And you can do this with anything and everything. To just look at it and with your mind thinking of it as, how does this express godliness? Because the starting point is everything is godliness. Everything has God embedded in it. Otherwise, it couldn't exist. So look at the beauty. I have a friend. He says, "Look at the squirrel." It's an amazing thing. I mean, look at how those parts will all work together and how tight that body is, and there's nothing extra on it. Well, the creation is as meticulously done as that. So there's, all over the place, little things running around, plants growing, et cetera, all of which are expressing an invisible life force.
It's very interesting because this is something that like there was they considered him Litvish, Rabbi Victor Miller,
Yeah.
and he has many lectures about this. But the truth about Rabbi Miller is that he was in Baltimore. His parents were very poor. He was going to public school, and the person who taught him Torah was Chabad, and he learned Tanya as a high school student.
Let me just say as an aside, I mean, you have maybe no idea because you weren't at Baal Shuva, but how many of the Baal Shuva in Chabad went to Rabbi Miller when Rabbi Miller was around? He caught a lot of us.
And really, that's what he always spoke of. And now I'm understanding that without mentioning it as often as you and I would expect. This was his foundation.
Yeah. So everything you look at, let's go back to his words, the fourth line down. Everything you look at, deepen in your brain and imagine in your intellect, in your heart, the inyan of Yehudi is Borach Hamitis. See the unity of God in everything because it's there. It's just a little different way of looking at things. But get into the habit of that. That's the other point that's brought in Tanya and in Sifrei Musar also. Hergel nasa teva sheni. Accustoming yourself to see things like this makes it your second nature to see things like this.
One of the things he would say is that if you found a quarter in an apple, you'd get very excited, but a seed is infinitely more exciting.
Yep. That's you mentioned a seed. I think I told you this once. I was at a wedding in California, and I was walking it was in a beautiful wooded spot, and walking down the trail to the chuppah, there were various signs posted there by the people who made that little place. And one of the signs said, man can count the number of seeds in an apple, but only God can count the number of apples in a seed. So everything is there.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. Thank you.
Okay, so see how there's the unity of God in everything. See, well, think, imagine, embed in your seichel and in your bina, which is connected with the heart, how Hashem fills all worlds, the upper worlds and the lower worlds. And even this world, right? As I said, the concrete, the trees on the street. They're all manifestations of God's glory. And all of them, this is another point which we didn't bring out, all of this in infinite vastness of implementation of godliness is nothing compared to him himself. Everything is considered like nothing. In truth, all those trees and everything, are all manifestations of him, and at the same time, he is all that exists. So everything that exists is an aspect of him, and he himself is alone, because ein od milvado, there is nothing besides him. In the upper worlds and in the lower worlds, mamish. He is just as alone now after the creation as he was before the creation. Nothing changes him. He changes everything, but nothing changes him. And so this is part of the contemplation. This is the meditation that hopefully somebody writes these things down. I'm hoping I have to get involved in this, but I just can't seem to grab my time to get involved in our long book on in the Google Doc. Nevertheless, so think about that all this change and variation that goes on in the world and is on my table and out in the street, all of this doesn't affect any change in him. And even in this place, this particular block, this particular step of my front steps, which has been created in this world, and all of the Hashemayim ve'oretz and the heavens and earth, v'kol tzevom, and all the hosts of heaven, he alone is filling this place, or all of these places. And even now, even after the creation, he is still alone, without any change having occurred to him. As I said, he changes everything, but He does not change. Because all the created things are really nullified and nothing in front of him, as we'll learn in the Gerasa in Shadichad Ve'amuna, that the Alter Rebbe brings this expression of the Baal Shem Tov, that when I'm speaking about the proper way to understand creation is that Hashem is creating everything constantly, and if he were to stop creating, and he uses the muscle of breathing, if he were to stop breathing, everything would revert to nothing. What means nothing? To himself alone, before the creation. So for there to be a creation, Hashem has to be breathing or pushing or talking. That's the metaphor, right? He's speaking things into existence, because that's the metaphor of Torah. He creates with speech. He's speaking things into existence all the time. And if he were to stop speaking, God forbid, then everything would go back into himself the way we do when we stop speaking, and there's only just us. So everything becomes bottled to him in terms of its existence. Kaviyachol, if you could say such a thing. And this, as he says now, the way he brings these things into being is oisis hadibur, in his letters of, quote, speech, umachshava, and his letters of thought, so to speak, and when they revert back to their source, before they become letters of speech or letters of thought, then they disappear into his God consciousness. So humahusa nefesh musa, and that's where for us, the analogy to us is, right, we said we should put this upon we should imagine this in our intellect, our thought, our intellect, but where does that come from? Where do those shapes and forms called thought and the imaginations and the drawings that we make in our mind come from? They come from also a singular source, which is the Mahusa Nefesh, the essence of the soul, where there is no differentiation in the essence of the soul. Lahavdil, just like there's no differentiation in him himself, in the Nefesh, and that's Musa, in the essence of the soul. Shehein Eser Rechinius, and where is the internality of the soul that you don't see? The vessel, the vehicles which are responsible for what you do see. These are the 10 categories, i.e., which are analogous, of course, to the 10 spheres of Hashem, which are Chokhmah, Bina, Vidas, etc. These 10 spheros, 10 powers, just like the 10 spheres, have not yet come into the lower level of letters yet. They don't until these 10 powers of our souls don't come into any concrete expression until they're invested in thought. And then they become letters of thought. Kamasha Kosev, as is written in Perek Kof V'Chof Aleph Be'orichas Ayin Sham, if you look back at those parakim, you'll see on page 26 in the Hebrew edition. You'll see more detail about this. Well, Kamasha Kosev Gamke, and this is also written in Bet Machamach in another place. Hamoshel Gashmi Lezeh, a physical metaphor for this. The nullification of the ray of the sun, when that ray of the sun is in its source. What's the source? Which is a guf kadar hashemesh, the body of the globe of the sun, sheberakia, in the heavens. Shagam shum. So listen to this, Marshall. You have a ray of the sun, right? The ray appears only through the atmosphere when there's a certain kind of diffusion and condensation. And even we'll call that the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum allows the ray of the sun to become visible to us. But when the ray of the sun is in the sun, which shigam shom meir umispashit, certainly that ray of sun is there in the sun. And in fact, it's more powerful there because it hasn't yet come through the diminution of the atmosphere. It's still more powerful there. It's more powerful when it's in the sun itself than it is when it radiates out. I'm adding these words like through the atmosphere in what's called the cholol ha'olam, the space of the world. Elishashum, however, there, when it's in the sun, it's entirely nullified. You don't talk about rays when you're on the sun. There are no rays shining from it. There's just the sun. But that energy of light, of course, there in its source is much more powerful before it gets diffused into the atmosphere where you do call it rays. So there, back in its source, it's it's as if it has no existence, right? It has no tangibility, and its strength is at its peak. So Koch is similarly, Derek Marshall, by way of a metaphor, is the nullification of the world and all its fullness when it's in its existence in relation to its source. Shehu Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which is the source, is the infinite light, the Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Hukamash Koshev Shom Berichas, and is written there in those chapters that we mentioned at length. So, if a person will deepen his thought or her thought and think about this and embed it in your bina and let your bina let it roll into your heart, Yisamach libo, as he says, your heart will become rejoicing, v'togil nafshe, and your soul will be gleeful, happy. Avgilas, and there's the word gal, right? Gilas, chapter Lamed Gimel. Avgilas v'rinon b'cholev, there will be a joyousness and a singing with the entirety of the heart and soul, v'nefesh ma'oid. Emunazu, if a person positions his head and heart, her head and heart this way. Kirabahu, because the amuna will become very big if you look at things this way. Kihi kirvas elakim mamish, and this is what we call kirvas elakim mamish, the bringing close to you of God mamish, because you're making it and seeing it as part of every teeny little thing that exists. And he says, articulates here a saying which has been passed down through the generations. The Rebbe has said this so many times. Zeh kol ha'odam. This is the entirety of a person. V'taklis b'riyosoi, and the whole purpose of his being created. U'b'riyas kol ha'olamas, elyonim v'tachtonim, and it's the reason that all the worlds, the upper worlds and the lower worlds, have come into being, to be, and I'll put in the words, to express, and to be evident that they are a dwelling place for Hashem in the lower worlds, mamish. As will be explained later, chapter 36, at length. How great is the joy of an ordinary person, meaning a low guy, a person who's not so sophisticated. Think about a person, a simple person. The joy that simple person has, by being, when he's brought close to the king. And the king comes, because now the king is coming to you. Your awareness of God is now coming to you, right? You're living with it in every breath you take, in every move you make, in every stone you walk over, right? So the king, this awareness now of the king is lodging within you, Vedor Itoy, and dwells within you. Imagine the joy of having Imoy Bebeisa, the king, in your house. How much more so, the end case without end, how much more so when this king is the king of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be he. We could see if it's written, who is the person who dares to come to bring his heart to me? In other words, I'm giving you a challenge, saying, right? I'm everywhere. Just open up your eyes, right? Says Hashem. Na'um Hashem. That's what God says to us. That's today's Tanya. So there. Any questions? Rosa?
Just part of it feels to me that like we have to have emuna because we have to know that this is happening. Some days you feel it more and some days you feel it less, but with every bracha you say, or with every what ask, like you say, Berkos HaShachar, what this is happening. Rabbi Majeski, this was very helpful to me. He said that you're in a room and it's dark and you put on a switch and the light comes. So he compared that to saying a bracha. When you recognize that it's from Hashem, that brings in the light.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're making that connection with the abundance. So some days you feel it more and some days you don't feel it as much, but you're making that connection, like with that shefa.
Fine. I'll just put it a little bit differently, that this, you don't have to have a muna. It's, what we're taking, it's the other way around. That by looking at things and appreciating the godliness within everything, that fosters a muna. That gives you the sense of faith that knows that to know, just walk around and know that ein od milvado, whether I see it or not, because I can't see it with my eyes, right? And I can't grasp it with my mind. So what faculty is giving me this feeling? It's the faculty of Amunah. And the more you habituate, the more you foster and grow your Amunah. So, yeah. Because for me, I don't know about you, for me it's harder with the brucha. I can take that, having done what I've just said, I can take that into the davening. That's why I like my walk to 770. I get to observe all forms of embedded godliness along the way. Some of them stranger than others.
That's what I appreciate. I like what you just said. This is the avoda to build the amuna.
Yeah.
It's not just like this, have amuna.
Right.
There's a whole
skill
set to it.
I keep coming back to the word amuna itself is associated with the word umnas. Umnas is craftsmanship. An uman is a craftsperson. You have to craft it. And this is how you craft it. And the more you craft it, of course, the more amuna you have, and you can apply that to larger situations in life that may be somewhat difficult otherwise to deal with.
Another experience I had is that we're near Catterskill Falls, and I walked, there was this hike to do because the parking lot that was closer to it was full. So you had to park further away, and you had this long hike through the woods till you get to that viewing platform. And that particular day, you had so many from Jews. It was a Bein Hazmanim, it was vacation, and people traveled from far and wide. And they were coming. I observed people doing this. They were coming, posing for a picture, and then turning back and not even looking. And I said to this, like frum lady who was there with her daughter, very frum lady. I said, "Why don't you look at it and kind of connect with Hashem? Like, why are you just ready to turn back and without even
what did she say to you?
This moment."
What did she say
to you? She said to me, "I connected with Hashem this morning. I daven chakras."
Okay. All right. So however you connect. And know that, from our chapter here, it's the things that you might take for granted that you stop taking them for granted. And see in your mind's eye, at least in your machshava and your seichel and your bina, the Yehuda Yisborach, the unity of Hashem in everything. Till we meet again. Okay?
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.